The rain fell hard that night, turning the streets into mirrors of broken light. A little girl no older than 10 crouched beneath a torn blanket outside a cafe window. Her tiny hands clutched a soggy piece of cardboard with one word scrawled in shaky letters: hungry. People passed by, umbrellas shielding them, coats wrapped tight, but no one stopped. Inside, laughter and the clink of glasses mocked her empty stomach. Then, headlights cut through the storm. A sleek black car slowed, its engine purring like a beast in the night. From the back seat, a man stepped out, tailored suit, polished shoes, his life as far from hers as the stars. He froze when their eyes met. What he saw in her gaze would change not just her life, but his forever. Now, let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever seen someone so invisible to the world, yet so unforgettable to you? This story is about that kind of moment, the kind that stops you in your tracks, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about life, money, and happiness. Today, I'll take you into the world of a little girl who had nothing and a man who thought he had everything. What happened when their worlds collided is a story you won't forget. So, stay with me. And as you watch, I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done if you saw that little girl in the rain? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs hope. And let's dive in. Her name was Lena, and from the very beginning, life seemed determined to test her. She was born in a small city where the buildings leaned tiredly against each other, their bricks cracked, their windows clouded. Her mother, a gentle woman with tired eyes, worked 2 jobs, one as a cleaner at a hospital, the other as a seamstress at night. Her father? Lena never really knew him. He disappeared before her first birthday, leaving behind nothing but a photograph with his arm draped lazily around her mother's shoulder, smiling as if he belonged to another world. Despite the absence, Lena grew up with a light in her eyes. As a child, she laughed easily, even when the apartment was cold and the fridge was nearly empty. She would take a pencil stub and scrap paper her mother brought home from work, sketching houses with gardens, children holding balloons, and always a family sitting together at a table full of food. "Why do you always draw so much food?" her mother asked one night, smoothing Lena's tangled hair. "Because when you draw it, Mama, you don't feel hungry anymore," Lena replied with innocent wisdom. Her mother's heart squeezed. She wished she could give her daughter more than pencil drawings and whispered promises. But money slipped through her fingers like sand. Rent was late more often than not, and some nights they boiled potatoes and called it dinner. Yet Lena never complained. She learned early how to stretch small joys into big ones. A neighbor gave her a used doll with one eye missing, and Lena treated it like a princess. The neighborhood where they lived wasn't safe. Shattered bottles glittered on sidewalks. Stray dogs prowled alleys. Men loitered near the corner shop, their eyes sharp, their laughter cruel. Still, Lena found beauty where she could. She noticed the lilac bush that bloomed every spring near the bus stop, the way sunlight spilled through broken blinds in their apartment, turning dust into stars. She had a gift for finding wonder in places others ignored. But wonder couldn't protect her from reality. By the time Lena was 8, Her mother's health had started to fail. Long hours bent over sewing machines and hospital floors had worn her body down. She coughed often, a deep rattling sound that made Lena's chest tighten with worry. One night, while Lena was coloring at the kitchen table, her mother collapsed. The ambulance came, red lights painting their shabby walls. Lena waited in the hospital hallway for hours, legs dangling from a chair too big for her, clutching her one-eyed doll. When the doctor finally came out, his expression told her more than his words. Pneumonia had taken her mother too soon. That night, Lena's world broke. She was sent to live with her aunt, her mother's sister, a woman named Irina. At first, Lena hoped this was a blessing. Irina lived in a bigger apartment with polished floors and working heat. She had a husband, Victor, who drove a shiny car, and 2 children who wore clean clothes and carried new backpacks to school. To Lena, it felt like stepping into the world she had drawn in her notebooks. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Irina said on the first night, stroking her cheek. "You'll be safe here." But safety was a fragile illusion. The warmth of Irina's smile quickly faded. Within weeks, Lena realized she was not seen as family, but as a burden. Her cousins mocked her clothes, whispering at the breakfast table. Victor barely acknowledged her, except to mutter about another mouth to feed. Irina, though polite in front of neighbors, began to treat Lena like an invisible shadow in her own home. "Take this plate to the sink," she'd order, snapping her fingers. "No, you eat later. Guests first." Meals became a cruel reminder of her place. Her cousins piled their plates with chicken and rice, while Lena was given scraps. Sometimes just bread crusts. She would sit quietly at the corner of the table, pretending she wasn't hungry, drawing circles with her finger on the wood. At school, things weren't easier. Lena's secondhand clothes drew laughter. Teachers pitied her, but pity doesn't protect a child from cruelty. One day, during art class, when she proudly showed her drawing of a family sitting at a table, her classmates snickered. "Is that supposed to be you? You don't have a family like that." The words cut deep, though Lena kept her head down, pretending not to hear. Still, she clung to her dreams. She wanted to become an artist. She imagined herself painting big murals across gray walls, filling the world with colors where there was only despair. At night, after everyone else was asleep, she'd sketch by the faint glow of the streetlight through the window. It was the only time she felt truly free. Irina noticed one night. She burst into the room, saw Lena hunched over paper, and snatched it away. "Wasting pencils on nonsense? You think drawings will feed you? Clean the bathroom tomorrow instead." Her words carried no warmth, only disdain. From then on, Lena learned to hide her sketches under her mattress, guarding them like treasure. The environment in that apartment weighed on her spirit. The living room smelled of strong cologne and cigarette smoke. The air was thick with arguments between Irina and Victor. The cousins bickered over toys they never let Lena touch. The only corner that felt like hers was the small bed in the storage room, where old boxes and broken chairs crowded around. She made it her safe space, lining the wall with her secret drawings, each one whispering hope into her lonely nights. Despite everything, Lena's heart remained tender. She helped her cousins with homework, even when they mocked her. She carried groceries up the stairs without being asked. She smiled at the janitor in her school, the only adult who spoke kindly to her. She believed, stubbornly, that kindness mattered, even when no one showed it to her. But kindness alone couldn't shield her from hunger. Irina controlled every bite Lena ate, every coin she spent. "Don't expect luxuries here," she'd snap. "Be grateful you have a roof." And though Lena nodded obediently, inside she wondered if gratitude was supposed to taste this bitter. As years passed, the whispers of her neighbors began to sting too. People noticed how Irina's children wore brand new coats, while Lena shivered in her thin jacket. They saw her standing outside in the cold when the family dined in restaurants, left behind because there wasn't enough space. Some turned their heads away, uncomfortable. Others muttered, "Poor child," but did nothing. Lena grew older, but her innocence never hardened into anger. Instead, it deepened into silence. She carried her pain like an invisible weight, tucked behind her shy smile. The little girl who once laughed easily now spoke softly, as though afraid her words might offend the air itself. Yet behind her quiet eyes burned an ember, a small, unshakable belief that life could be different. She still dreamed of colors, of painting walls, of drawing tables full of food and families who didn't leave anyone hungry. Every line she drew in secret was a promise to herself that one day she would be more than this. And though she didn't know it yet, the universe had already started writing the next chapter of her story. One that would carry her from that dark, crowded storage room to the heart of a stranger whose life was about to be changed by hers. Lena's life in her aunt's apartment shifted from cold neglect to open cruelty as the years dragged on. What began as quiet dismissals soon grew into calculated humiliation. It started with food. At dinner, Irina made a performance out of Lena's portion. She would place steaming bowls of soup in front of her children, their spoons clinking eagerly, while Lena was given nothing more than a crust of bread or watery leftovers. "Eat slowly," Irina would sneer, "so you learn not to waste." Lena would chew in silence, her eyes fixed on the plates she wasn't allowed to touch. Her cousins giggled, making exaggerated noises as they stuffed their mouths, their cheeks bulging with meat and potatoes. Lena swallowed her hunger and forced a smile, though her stomach groaned loud enough for them to hear. One evening, her cousin deliberately dropped half a chicken drumstick on the floor. He smirked as it rolled toward Lena's chair. "You can have it if you want," he teased. Lena bent down, hand trembling, but Irina's voice cracked through the room. "Don't you dare." Only dogs eat from the floor. The laughter that followed seared into Lena's ears, and she sat frozen, her face burning. It wasn't only the meals. Chores became her constant punishment. While her cousins lounged in front of the television, Lena scrubbed the bathroom tiles until her fingers wrinkled from bleach. She carried buckets of water, polished Victor's shoes, washed dishes that weren't hers. Every time she tried to rest, Irina found something new. "You want to eat under my roof?" Then work. Even her school life turned into another battleground. Irina often refused to buy Lena supplies. She arrived in class with a pencil worn down to its last inch, notebooks with pages missing. Teachers noticed, but when they gently asked, Lena only shook her head. She didn't want to betray her aunt, though betrayal was what she lived with daily. One winter morning, Lena's shoes split open. She walked through snow with her socks soaking wet, her toes numb. At school, other children laughed at her, pointing at the holes. She sat quietly at her desk, hiding her feet under the chair. When she returned home and asked Irina if she could have new shoes, the response was sharp. "You think money grows on trees? Be glad you have feet to walk with." Her cousins, both wearing brand new boots, stomped around the apartment in mock parades. But the cruelty wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came in silence, in the way Victor ignored her existence, or how Irina left her out of family photographs. At birthdays, Lena watched candles being blown out from the hallway. She was never invited to sit at the decorated table, never asked to make a wish. Neighbors noticed. The old woman across the hall saw Lena carrying bags of trash at odd hours. She once whispered, "Are you all right, child?" But when Lena's aunt appeared behind her, smiling too sweetly, the woman said nothing more. Another neighbor shook his head when he saw Lena waiting outside in the cold as her cousins rode off in the family car. Yet he, too, looked away. Everyone saw. No one intervened. The deepest wound came the day Lena's drawings were discovered again. She had sketched late at night, carefully hiding the papers under her mattress. But one afternoon, while she was scrubbing the floor, her cousin rummaged through her room and pulled them out. He waved them like trophies. "Look!" She still draws her stupid pictures. Irina snatched them from his hand, flipping through with disgust. The drawings showed tables full of food, families smiling, children holding balloons, dreams on paper. "This?" Irina barked, crumpling one in her fist. "This is why you waste your time? Pathetic." She ripped the papers one by one, the sound of tearing echoing like thunder in Lena's chest. "You'll never be anything, Lena. Not with that nonsense. Learn your place." That night, Lena cried into her pillow, muffling the sound so no one would hear. Her dreams, her only sanctuary, had been torn apart by hands that should have protected her. And then came the cruelest humiliation of all, being pushed onto the streets. Irina had begun using Lena for errands outside the house. "Go beg at the bakery for leftovers," she ordered one day. Lena hesitated, shame burning her cheeks, but Irina shoved her toward the door. "If you want to eat, earn it." So Lena stood outside the bakery, clutching her thin coat, whispering, "Excuse me, do you have anything spare?" Some people ignored her. Others scowled, muttering, "Go home, girl." A few pressed coins into her palm, but she felt the sting of their pity more than the bite of hunger. When she returned, Irina counted the coins and smirked. "See? Useful after all." From then on, it became routine. Lena, the errand girl. Lena, the beggar. Each trip chipped away at her pride. She longed to disappear into the cracks of the pavement. Yet she obeyed, because disobedience meant no food at all. One rainy evening, Irina grew angrier than usual. "You're too slow. You're lazy," she snapped, dragging Lena by the arm across the kitchen. In her fury, she shoved Lena so hard that she hit the corner of the table. Pain shot through her side, but Irina only hissed, "Don't cry here. Go to your room." Her cousins watched with wide eyes. For once, they didn't laugh, but they said nothing either. Silence was safer than compassion. In the small storage room that night, Lena curled on her bed, clutching her ribs, staring at the ceiling. Tears blurred the glow of the street lamp outside. Her thoughts spun like fragile threads. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am worthless. Maybe I'll never be anything more than this. The cruelty worked. Like poison, slow and steady. Every insult, every chore, every empty plate filled her with doubt. Yet somewhere, beneath it all, a stubborn ember still glowed. She didn't know how long it would last, or if it would survive the storms to come. But destiny was watching, and it would not let Lena's story end in that storage room. The sky that evening looked bruised. Gray clouds layered over the city, pressing down as though the air itself carried sorrow. Lena had been sent out once again, clutching a tin cup Irina had shoved into her hands. Her aunt's words rang in her ears. "Don't come back empty. Do you hear me?" The streets glistened with rain from an earlier storm. Puddles reflected neon signs, stretching them like broken promises across the pavement. Lena's thin shoes soaked through immediately, every step squelching. She pulled her coat tighter, but the fabric was too thin, the zipper broken. She found a spot near the cafe window where warmth and laughter spilled onto the street like a world she would never enter. Inside, couples clinked glasses, steam rose from bowls of soup, and a boy her age bit into a sandwich bigger than her hand. Her stomach growled so loudly she pressed the tin cup against it as if to muffle the sound. People passed her by, faces hidden beneath umbrellas, eyes trained ahead. A few glanced her way, quickly turning back as if her presence was an inconvenience, a stain on their evening. Some dropped coins into her cup without looking, their footsteps quickening. Others muttered under their breath, "Where are her parents?" Or, "Poor child." Each word struck harder than the rain. Lena lowered her head, cheeks burning. She whispered the same line Irina had drilled into her. "Please, just something to eat." Time stretched painfully. The city moved around her, indifferent. The cup rattled with a few coins, but her hunger felt heavier than the metal in her hands. And then it happened. The growl of an engine cut through the chatter of the street. Headlights sliced across the wet pavement, scattering reflections like shards of glass. A sleek black car slowed near the curb, its polished surface gleaming even under the dull sky. It didn't belong here, not in this part of the city where walls peeled and trash bins overflowed. The car door opened. Out stepped a man in a tailored suit, his posture upright, his shoes untouched by mud. He looked out of place, like he had walked out of another life entirely. His hair was streaked with silver. His watch glinted under the streetlight, and his presence seemed to hush the space around him. This was Daniel Mercer, a self-made millionaire, but Lena didn't know his name, nor his story. To her, he was just another figure walking past. Only he didn't walk past. As he adjusted his coat, his gaze fell on her, this small, shivering girl clutching a tin cup outside the glowing cafe. Their eyes locked. For a moment, Daniel froze. The noise of the street seemed to fade. In Lena's eyes, he didn't just see hunger. He saw exhaustion. He saw bruised hope, the kind that fights to survive, even when the world offers no mercy. Something inside him stirred, something he hadn't felt in years. He stepped closer, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers. Rain dotted his shoulders, but he didn't seem to notice. "What's your name?" he asked softly. Lena blinked, unsure if she should answer. Irina had warned her never to speak too much to strangers, but something in his voice felt different. Not sharp, not mocking, not hurried, gentle, real. "Lena," she whispered. Daniel glanced at the tin cup in her hands. Only a few coins clinked inside. He looked back at her thin coat, the soaked shoes, the way her small body trembled. A lump rose in his throat. "Have you eaten today?" The question was simple, but Lena felt her chest tighten. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She lowered her gaze, ashamed. Daniel's jaw clenched. He straightened slowly, pulling out his wallet. But when he looked at the cafe window again, the glowing warmth, the plates of food, the laughter, it struck him that a few coins weren't enough. This child needed more than pity tossed into a cup. He pushed the cafe door open. Warmth rushed over him, the smell of bread and roasted chicken filling the air. Conversations faltered as he gestured toward the window. "Bring her inside," he said firmly to the staff. "Now." Lena's heart pounded. Inside? The very thought made her panic. She shook her head, clutching the tin cup tighter. "No, I'm fine here," she murmured, almost inaudible. But Daniel stepped back outside. He extended his hand. His palm was steady, waiting, patient. "You don't have to stand in the rain anymore." Lena stared at his hand. It looked impossibly clean, foreign. No one had offered her a hand in years, not with kindness. Her fingers twitched. She wanted to trust it, but Irina's voice screamed in her memory. "People don't care about you. They never will." The rain pattered around them. The city moved on. For a moment, time seemed to suspend between Lena's trembling hesitation and Daniel's unwavering hand. Finally, with a breath that caught in her chest, she placed her small, cold fingers in his. Daniel's grip was warm, steady. He smiled faintly, as though assuring her she had made the right choice. Together, they stepped into the cafe. The sudden burst of warmth, the golden lights, the chatter, it overwhelmed Lena. She froze at the threshold, feeling every pair of eyes on her. She wanted to shrink back into the rain, but Daniel guided her gently forward. "Table for two," he said firmly, ignoring the curious stares. The waiter hesitated, glancing at Lena's soaked clothes, then at Daniel's commanding presence. "Of course, sir." They were seated by the window, the very spot where Lena had been watching minutes earlier. A menu was placed in front of her, its pages filled with words she could hardly focus on. Daniel slid it closer. "Order whatever you want." Her eyes widened. "Anything?" "Anything," he nodded. She stared at the glossy pictures, pasta, soup, desserts. Her throat tightened. She pointed hesitantly at a simple bowl of soup and bread. "Is that all?" Daniel asked gently. She nodded quickly, afraid of asking for too much. He smiled sadly, then turned to the waiter. "Bring her that, and bring everything else she pointed at with her eyes." Lena blinked, confused. But when the food began to arrive, plate after plate, steaming, fragrant, her hands trembled. Tears stung her eyes. She had never seen so much food in one place. not for her. Daniel watched as she lifted the spoon to her lips. The first sip of hot soup brought color to her pale face, and she closed her eyes as if savoring not just the taste, but the warmth of being seen, of being cared for. Daniel leaned back, a thought pressing heavy in his chest. Who lets a child suffer like this? Who leaves her alone in the rain? And just as he resolved to find out, the cafe door slammed open. Through the gust of wind and dripping umbrellas, a familiar voice pierced the warmth. "Lena!" Irina's sharp tone cut through the room like a knife. Heads turned. Standing in the doorway, drenched but furious, was her aunt. Her eyes darted to the plates of food, then to Daniel. The cafe fell into hushed silence. Lena froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Her heart dropped. Daniel's gaze sharpened as he turned toward the furious woman who had just claimed the doorway. And in that moment, the battle lines of Lena's life began to shift. The cafe's warm glow turned icy the moment Irina stormed inside. Her wet hair clung to her face, her sharp eyes narrowing on Lena. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, stomping forward. Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear, her tone dripping with outrage. Lena shrank in her chair, clutching her spoon as if it could shield her. The laughter and chatter that had filled the cafe moments earlier fell into silence. All eyes shifted between the furious woman and the trembling child. Daniel rose calmly, his tall figure towering between Irina and Lena. "She's eating," he said evenly, his voice carrying a quiet authority, something she clearly needed. Irina's lips curled. "She's my niece." "You had no right to interfere." Daniel didn't flinch. "And you had no right to leave her begging in the rain." The words hit Irina like a slap. Gasps rippled through the cafe. Her cheeks flushed red, but instead of shame, anger blazed hotter. She grabbed Lena's arm, yanking her up. "We're leaving." Lena winced, but Daniel's hand caught Irina's wrist. His grip was firm, controlled. "Not until she finishes her meal," he said. The tension in the air was electric. Customers whispered. Waiters froze. Lena's heart hammered in her chest. Never in her life had anyone stood up for her. Not like this. Irina finally jerked her hand free, glaring daggers. "This isn't over," she spat, before storming out. The cafe door slammed behind her, rattling the glass. Silence lingered, broken only by Lena's shaky breaths. Daniel knelt by her again, his voice soft now. "You don't have to be afraid. Eat." Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. For the first time, she ate without fear of someone snatching her plate away. Each bite was more than food. It was dignity. It was hope. But hope, Lena soon learned, is fragile. That night, Irina's wrath was unleashed in full. The moment they returned home, Irina slammed the door and shoved Lena toward her tiny room. "How dare you embarrass me in public?" she screamed. Victor stood by, arms crossed, silent but complicit. "I didn't—" Lena tried to speak, but Irina's hand cracked across her cheek. The sting burned. "You made me look like a monster in front of everyone. Do you think you're clever? Do you think that man cares about you? He doesn't. Nobody does." The words sliced deeper than the slap. Irina grabbed Lena's sketchbook from under her pillow and ripped it apart again. "Dreams won't save you. Remember that." That night, Lena cried herself to sleep, the taste of warm soup still lingering on her tongue. a cruel reminder of what she had, only to lose again. Days passed, and Irina tightened her control. She forbade Lena from going near the cafe, warning, "If I ever catch you talking to him again, you'll regret it." She gave Lena even harsher chores, smaller portions of food, longer hours standing outside with her tin cup. But something inside Lena had shifted. For the first time, she had seen what kindness looked like. Daniel's steady eyes, his warm hand reaching out, it planted a seed of defiance, quiet at first, like a whisper in her heart. Maybe I deserve better. That whisper grew each time Daniel appeared, because he did. He hadn't forgotten her. The next week, his car slowed near the cafe again. Lena stood outside, shivering, Irina's shadow watching from across the street. Daniel rolled down his window, slipping a small brown bag into her hands. Inside were sandwiches, fruit, and a note. "Stay strong." Irina spotted it. That evening, she tore into Lena again. "Are you trying to make me look weak? Are you sneaking behind my back?" She grabbed the food and threw it in the trash. "You'll eat when I say you can eat." Still, Lena kept the note. She hid it under her mattress, clutching it at night when the walls closed in. Daniel, meanwhile, began asking questions. Who was this child? Why was she on the streets? He hired a private investigator, determined to uncover her story. What he learned made his blood boil. A dead mother, an absent father, a guardian who neglected and exploited her. But Lena's struggle was far from over. At school, rumors spread quickly. Some children whispered that she was a beggar. Others mocked her, imitating her holding a tin cup. Teachers tried to hush them, but the cruelty stung. Lena walked the halls, with her head bowed, her sketches now reduced to quick scribbles on scraps hidden in her pockets. Yet one teacher noticed, a young woman named Miss Carter. She saw the bruises, the worn shoes, the way Lena's eyes flinched at sudden movements. One afternoon, she knelt by Lena's desk. "You have talent," she said, holding up one of the hidden sketches. "Don't ever stop drawing." The words lit a spark. For the first time since her mother's death, Lena felt someone believe in her again. But believing in herself was harder. One evening, Irina shoved Lena out with her tin cup again, muttering, "Don't come back without money." The streets were colder than ever, the wind biting at her skin. She stood outside the cafe, but this time Daniel wasn't there. Hours dragged. People passed, indifferent. The cup remained nearly empty. Fear gnawed at her. If she returned without coins, Irina's fury would be unbearable. But her body was weak, her legs trembling from hunger. She slumped against the wall, tears slipping down her cheeks. A woman in a red scarf paused, crouching in front of her. She pressed a sandwich into Lena's hands and whispered, "Eat, sweetheart. Don't give up." Then she hurried away before Lena could even say thank you. The sandwich filled her stomach, but it couldn't erase the dread of going home. That night, Irina exploded. "Worthless!" she shouted, shaking Lena by the shoulders. "Even begging, you fail." She shoved her into the storage room, locking the door. "Stay there until you learn your lesson." Lena spent the night curled on the cold floor, clutching the sandwich wrapper like a lifeline. Maybe I am worthless, she thought. But then she remembered Miss Carter's words and Daniel's note. The ember inside her flickered. Daniel's involvement only deepened. He began waiting discreetly, timing his visits when Irina wasn't nearby. He'd hand Lena small bags of food, notebooks, pencils. Each time, Lena's eyes lit up, though fear always shadowed her joy. "She'll find out," Lena whispered once. "She already knows," Daniel replied. "But she can't stop me from caring." Still, Lena wrestled with doubt. What if Irina was right? What if Daniel would disappear, like everyone else had? Trust felt dangerous, yet without it, she had nothing but emptiness. One evening, as she drew quietly in the back of class with a new pencil Daniel had given her, her cousin snatched it. "Where'd you get this? You steal it?" he sneered. Before Lena could answer, he snapped it in two. Her chest ached, but she picked up the broken pieces, holding them together as if they could still draw. "They can break the pencil, but not my hand," she told herself. And so the struggle became a pattern. Moments of light followed by crushing darkness. Daniel's kindness versus Irina's cruelty. Ms. Carter's encouragement versus classmates' mockery. Lena's dreams versus her fear of punishment. Each day was a battle. Some she lost, retreating into silence. Others she won, even in small ways, like hiding a sketch in her pocket or saving half a sandwich for later. Through it all, she learned resilience. She discovered that survival wasn't just about enduring hunger or bruises. It was about holding on to a sliver of hope when everything else tried to rip it away. And though she didn't realize it yet, every small act of defiance, every sketch, every secret smile, every step she took toward Daniel's outstretched hand was leading her toward a confrontation that would finally change everything. The storm had been building for weeks. Every secret meeting between Daniel and Lena, every note tucked into her hand, every small act of defiance, it all led here. It happened on a cold Sunday evening. Daniel had arranged to meet Lena near the cafe, but instead of her small figure appearing, Irina arrived first. She dragged Lena by the arm, storming into the cafe, as though staging a trial in front of the world. Her grip on the girl was iron, her fury sharp enough to cut the air. "There he is," Irina spat, eyes flashing as she shoved Lena forward. "The rich man who thinks he can steal what isn't his." The cafe froze again, just like that first night. Customers turned their heads. Forks hung in midair. Daniel rose from his chair, his calm presence anchoring the room. He looked at Lena first, her wide, frightened eyes, her thin arm red where Irina's hand clutched it, and his jaw tightened. "She's not something to steal," Daniel said, voice low but steady. "She's a child. One you've been starving." Irina barked a laugh, sharp and hollow. "Starving? She has a roof, clothes, food when she deserves it. You don't know anything about our family." Daniel stepped closer, his gaze unflinching. "I know enough. I've seen her on the streets, begging while you sit at home. I've seen her shoes worn through, her body trembling in the cold. And I've heard the silence in her voice, the kind only cruelty teaches." Irina's face hardened, but her grip on Lena wavered. "You think money gives you the right to judge me?" "It gives me the means to act," Daniel shot back. The room stirred, waiters exchanging glances, strangers leaning in, tension humming through the air. Lena stood between them, frozen, as if the ground itself had cracked open. Irina pulled her closer, fingers digging in. You don't understand, Lena. Men like him don't care. They'll give you bread one day and forget your name the next. I'm your family. I'm the one who took you in when no one else wanted you. Lena's lips trembled. Those words, so often repeated, had been her prison. But now, with Daniel standing firm before her, the bars seemed weaker. Family doesn't do this, Daniel said, pointing to the fading bruise on Lena's cheek. Family doesn't treat a child like trash. Irina's breath caught, but she quickly masked it with rage. You have no proof. No one will believe you. That was when Daniel pulled something from his coat pocket, a slim folder. He laid it on the cafe table with deliberate calm. Actually, they will. Irina's eyes flickered. Inside were photographs the investigator had taken. Lena standing barefoot in the snow. Lena outside the bakery with her tin cup. Lena's tiny storage room with torn drawings on the wall. Each image was sharper than any accusation. Gasps rippled through the cafe. Irina's facade began to crack. Her hand slipped slightly from Lena's arm. You, she stammered, you had someone follow us. I had someone protect her, Daniel corrected, because clearly you won't. Irina's eyes darted around the room, searching for sympathy, but found only cold stares. The neighbors who once turned away were now witnesses, and silence no longer shielded her. Lena's heart pounded. She looked up at Daniel, then at her aunt. For the first time, she saw the shift of power, not in fists or fury, but in truth, laid bare. Irina hissed through clenched teeth. You think you can take her from me? Over my dead body. Daniel leaned forward, his voice quiet but deadly certain. If that's what it takes to save her, so be it. The words landed like thunder. Lena gasped softly. Never had anyone fought for her so openly, so fiercely. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time not from pain, from the realization that she mattered. Irina, cornered, tried one last weapon, shame. She knelt beside Lena, cupping her face in mock tenderness. Sweetheart, tell him. Tell him you want to stay with me. Tell him he's nothing but a stranger. Lena froze. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Every eye was on her. Her throat felt tight, her voice buried under years of fear. But Daniel's gaze caught hers, steady, patient, filled with belief. He didn't push, didn't plead. He simply waited, trusting her to speak. And something inside Lena broke free. Her voice wavered, barely above a whisper. She closed her eyes, summoning the courage that had lived in her sketches, in her dreams. Then, stronger, I don't want to stay. Irina's hand dropped. Lena stepped back, slipping out of her aunt's grip. Her small figure straightened, trembling but firm. You hurt me. You make me beg. You tell me I'm nothing. She looked up, eyes wet but fierce. But I'm not nothing. I'm not. The cafe erupted in murmurs. A stranger near the counter clapped once. Then others joined, the sound swelling like a tide. Irina's face twisted, caught between fury and disbelief. She spun toward Daniel. You filled her head with lies. No, Daniel said quietly. She finally spoke the truth. Security had been called by then. The cafe manager, nervous about the escalating scene, ushered 2 uniformed guards inside. They approached, their expressions stern. Is there a problem here? One asked. Daniel gestured toward Lena. This child has been abused. I'll be contacting the authorities immediately. Irina sputtered, but her words fell flat under the weight of the evidence, the witnesses, and most of all, Lena's voice. The guard stepped between them. Ma'am, you'll need to come with us. Irina's protests faded as she was escorted out, her figure shrinking in the doorway, her power dissolved in the light of truth. And then, silence again. Daniel knelt beside Lena, his voice soft enough that only she could hear. You were brave. Lena's tears spilled freely now, but she nodded, clutching his hand. You believed me, she whispered. I always will. The cafe, still buzzing with whispers, seemed to blur around them. For Lena, the world had just shifted. No longer a place where silence meant survival, but one where her voice had power and where someone stood beside her. The confrontation was over, but the battle for her future had only begun. The next morning, the gray skies above the city seemed to mirror the weight of what had just unfolded. But for Lena, something was different. For the first time, she woke without Irina's shadow looming over her. Instead, she sat in a quiet room at a child protection office, a blanket draped over her shoulders, a steaming mug of cocoa in her hands. Daniel stood nearby, speaking firmly with the social worker. His voice carried not just authority, but conviction. She cannot go back there. You've seen the evidence. You've heard her speak. That woman is unfit. The social worker nodded, flipping through the folder of photographs, reports, and witness statements Daniel's investigator had compiled. With this, the court won't hesitate. But it will still take a formal hearing. Daniel glanced at Lena, his eyes softening. Then let's not waste time. The courtroom was small, but to Lena it felt enormous. She sat at a wooden bench, her legs barely reaching the floor, hands twisting in her lap. Irina sat across the room, her hair pinned back sharply, her eyes filled with venom. She wore her best coat, trying to look respectable, but the cracks in her mask showed. Victor was absent, choosing silence over loyalty. The judge, an older woman with kind but stern eyes, called the room to order. We are here to discuss custody of the minor, Lena Petrova, and to review allegations of neglect and abuse. Irina shot to her feet. Your Honor, these accusations are lies. She is my niece. I took her in when no one else would. This man, she jabbed a finger at Daniel, is trying to buy her like some trophy. Daniel rose calmly, unshaken. I don't need a trophy. I don't need a child to fill my life, but I won't stand by while this one suffers. The evidence is clear. He gestured to the folder on the table. The judge opened it, her brow furrowing as she studied the photographs. Lena, in ragged clothes. Lena standing in snow with her shoes torn. Lena's bruised cheek. Lena clutching her tin cup in the rain. Irina's voice faltered. Those don't prove anything. Then the judge turned to Lena. Her voice softened. Child, would you like to speak? Lena's throat went dry. Her heart pounded in her ears. For a moment, fear threatened to silence her again. She glanced at Irina, those sharp eyes daring her to stay quiet. Then she turned toward Daniel. His steady gaze met hers, filled with encouragement. Taking a shaky breath, Lena stood. I don't want to live with my aunt. she whispered at first. The courtroom leaned in, louder now. She made me beg. She hit me. She told me I was nothing. Her small voice cracked, but she pressed on. But I am something. I want to go where I'm safe, where I can eat, where I can draw. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Irina gasping. The judge folded her hands, eyes filled with quiet fury at what she'd heard. I have heard enough. She looked at Irina. You have failed in your duty of care. Custody is revoked effective immediately. Irina's face drained of color. She sputtered, "No, you can't." But the gavel struck the block. Decision made. Lena will be placed under protective custody pending adoption proceedings. Mr. Mercer, you may apply for guardianship. The room buzzed with whispers. Lena clutched the edge of the bench, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of fear this time, but of release. Irina lunged forward, but security held her back. Her voice rose, shrill and desperate. You'll regret this, Lena. You'll regret turning against me. But Lena stood tall, her small frame trembling yet resolute. No, she said softly, but clearly enough for all to hear. I'll never regret being free. The words silenced Irina more effectively than the guards ever could. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters had caught wind of the millionaire standing up for a homeless girl. But Daniel shielded Lena with his coat, ushering her past the chaos into his car. As the door shut, muffling the noise, Lena exhaled shakily. Her eyes turned to Daniel. It's real? She whispered. I don't have to go back? He smiled gently, resting a reassuring hand over hers. It's real. From now on, you're safe. The car pulled away, city lights blurring past the windows. For the first time, Lena didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, heard, protected. She leaned her head against the glass, watching the world rush by. The ember inside her, once so fragile, now burned steady. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was stepping into a life where justice had been served, where her voice had power, and where hope had finally found a home. The first night after the courtroom decision, Lena lay in a real bed, soft sheets, a warm quilt, and a lamp that glowed gently instead of flickering. She pressed her cheek into the pillow, breathing in the clean scent of lavender detergent. It was such a simple thing, but to her it felt unreal. For years, she had fallen asleep in a cramped storage room surrounded by dust and broken chairs. Now, there was silence, safety. No footsteps pacing angrily in the hall, no doors slamming, no harsh voices tearing her apart. At first, she couldn't close her eyes. Her body, trained by years of fear, kept waiting for Irina to burst in. But slowly, as the hours passed, she realized no one was coming. For the first time in years, she drifted to sleep without tears. Daniel didn't try to replace her mother. He knew that loss was sacred, untouchable. Instead, he became something Lena had never truly known. A protector. He was there in quiet ways. Breakfast waiting on the table. A steady voice reminding her she didn't have to rush. She didn't have to hide. One morning, he noticed her sitting at the window with a pencil, sketching on the back of an envelope. He walked over and set down a large box. Inside were sketch pads, colored pencils, paints, more supplies than Lena had ever dreamed of. Her eyes widened. For me? Of course, Daniel said softly. Dreams aren't nonsense, Lena. They're seeds. They just need the right soil. She hugged the box to her chest as if it were treasure. That night, she drew until her fingers ached, colors spilling across the page. For the first time, she didn't have to hide her art. Healing wasn't instant. Some nights, nightmares dragged her back into the past. She would jolt awake, sweat on her brow, convinced Irina was still there. But Daniel was patient. With his support, Lena began therapy. She learned that her voice mattered, that her feelings weren't wrong, that what happened to her wasn't her fault. At school, whispers still followed her. Some kids remembered her with the tin cup, but now she walked with her head higher. She had clean clothes, new notebooks, and the courage to raise her hand in class. Ms. Carter, her teacher, beamed when Lena submitted a painting for the school art competition. A vibrant image of a table filled with food, surrounded by people smiling together. The same dream she'd drawn as a child, now alive in color. Weeks later, she won first prize. The applause that filled the auditorium wrapped around her like sunlight. That evening, Daniel framed her ribbon and placed it on the mantel. "This is just the beginning," he told her. Lena believed him. Irina tried, of course. She filed appeals, made phone calls, tried to paint herself as the victim. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the court denied her each time. Slowly, her shadow faded from Lena's life. And with every passing day, Lena realized the greatest victory wasn't Irina's punishment. It was her own freedom. Months later, Daniel took Lena to an art gallery. They wandered through the rooms filled with paintings, landscapes bursting with light, portraits that captured souls in strokes of color. Lena's eyes sparkled as she studied them. "Do you see yourself here one day?" Daniel asked. She nodded shyly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Yes. It was more than a dream now. It was a goal. The biggest moment came when Lena painted her first mural. Daniel had arranged permission for a gray, lifeless wall in the neighborhood. Lena stood before it with brushes and paints, her heart pounding. Passers-by watched curiously as she filled the concrete with color, bright flowers, children laughing, a family at a table overflowing with food. It was the picture she had drawn 100 times in secret, now stretching across an entire wall for the world to see. Neighbors who had once turned away stopped and stared. Some smiled, others whispered apologies in their hearts. A few clapped, their faces softening. Lena didn't paint for them, but their admiration felt like healing. When she stepped back, paint smudged on her cheeks, Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's beautiful," he said. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "It's ours. It's my life now." That night, Lena sat by her window, sketchbook open on her lap. The city stretched out before her, no longer cruel, but filled with possibility. She thought of her mother, of her whispered promise years ago to keep dreaming. She closed her eyes and whispered again, softly, "I'll keep drawing. I'll keep living, and I'll never stop believing." For the first time, her words weren't a wish. They were a truth. So, What does this story really tell us? At its core, it isn't just about a millionaire or a little girl. It's about how one act of kindness can rewrite an entire life. Daniel could have driven past that rainy street just like everyone else did. He had meetings, business, a world of his own waiting. But he stopped. He looked. He saw her. And that made all the difference. We live in a world where it's easy to walk by, to assume someone else will help, to tell ourselves we don't have time or that it's not our problem. But the truth is, sometimes a moment of attention, a hand stretched out, or even a kind word can be the very thing that keeps another person from giving up. Lena's story reminds us that people are not defined by the cruelty they endure, but by the resilience they carry. It also reminds us of the power we all hold, not just millionaires, not just people with influence. Every single one of us can be the Daniel in someone's story. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a moment where someone's kindness changed your life? Or maybe you were the one who stopped, who offered a hand. Share it in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else today. And if Lena's journey touched you, if it stirred something in your heart, then don't let it end here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us of what really matters. Because in the end, life isn't measured by wealth or status. It's measured by the moments we choose to see each other. And sometimes, those moments can change everything.